I'm going to talk about a tragedy and a mystery, and I'm going to draw from a couple of sources that talk about Francis that I found inspiring in these last few years. Sources like one I just kind of discovered completely by accident, and that's a source is W.B. Du Bois. And I just remember looking through an old book of a bunch of his collected writings that I had, and found way in the back is preserved perhaps his first commencement speech he ever gave. And it was given in 1907 in Washington, D.C., at the joint commencement exercises of Minor Normal School, M Street High School, and Armstrong Manual Training Schools. And it was in June of 1907. And his whole commencement address to these young students graduating was talking about St. Francis of Assisi and how the saint has comradeship with us in our lives, in the reality of our lives. Then we can retranslate that into our circumstances here in 2024 as well. But he starts, we have all been recently talking and thinking of San Francisco, that opulent, busy city which one day faced the shining western waters and the next fell into poverty, death, and ruin, because beneath its feet the earth trembled, the big earthquake of 1906. And then again, in its staggering rise, it has been swept by greed and prejudice in the throes of its new birth. Such strange catastrophe gives the whole world pause. It is not new, it is old, so old. And yet, ever and again, we need to be reminded that back of the hurrying, throbbing life of every city and every day lie the world-old things, birth and death, joy and sorrow, fraud and fear, human love and human hate. That these and these alone make life, and with these each life must deal. We remember this all the more keenly in the case of San Francisco because of the magic spell of the city's golden history, and because of the life of the man after whom this stricken metropolis was named. He stands forth in the world's annals as one of those saints and prophets who sought to read life's riddle and tell the world its true unraveling. That's how he starts the commencement address. In there, he's going to say something that I think is, I try to remember as, again, thinking about the ways Francis has been presented and represented to us, that the lesson of St. Francis of Assisi, Du Bois says, is not the renunciation of wealth in the deification of poverty. It is, on the contrary, simply this great truth. The work of the world is to satisfy the world's wants. And that the object of St. Francis was not to make the world poorer by his poverty, but richer. So for me, he stands as a patron saint that's allowed me to really deeply do some of my own work that we all need to do, plowing those mental terrains, those mental fields of old ideas, those old ideas that keep us from seeing what needs to be seen. And I go back to, and I think she's on tonight with us, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris and Willie Baptist's great book, where they talk about the approaches our movement has to education, to learning, and that it's about plowing the fields of old ideas, that we have to really get beneath and under the learning that keeps us from seeing our ways of needing to be connected to our movement work, to organizing, to change. And that so often we're filled with emotion-laden myths and stereotypes, and that can even be, certainly in our religious spaces, the way even like I grew up to understand the church and saints like Francis. And I think Francis himself learned this lesson and tried to apply it for his whole life. As Moses framed the beginning, I mean, profound, I don't know if it was even one moment of conversion like with all of us, maybe many different seasons of conversion, each one perhaps hopefully building and learning from previous moments, but also learning especially from the current moment. And so Francis, it was that shift the very dramatic shift from living this life of luxury to then this very deliberate embrace of poverty. But then for 20 years, learning through that experience of identifying with poverty and being able then to, before he died, I think compose an anthem or a song, among many other things, for us in our movement work. So that was the tragedy, and then the mystery or the miracle. There's many miracles associated with the saint. What Moses, you said you experience is not uncommon, right? We sometimes feel the saint's presence or inspiration in profound ways. Is it magic? Is it not? I'm not gonna judge all of that. But there's a story about, of all the many miracles, this one's probably one no one hears much about, and I myself came across it by accident. But I think it's one that actually is just this idea we need to plow this mental terrain, this we need to plow ourselves of old ideas that are keeping us from uniting together across class, across religion, across all dividing lines in a single unified reality of the poor organizing the poor. And it's a miracle of the miraculous plowing. The man of God, Francis, heard one day that 4 miles from where he was, in the foot of the Apennines, hidden among the hills, far from the haunts of people, there was a little church dedicated to the Blessed Virgin, and beside it a ruined nunnery. So there's a lot of ruined buildings in those days. This had once belonged to some Benedictine nuns who had been driven away by war and were now at Fabriano. Hearing of this, and because of his devotion to the Virgin and his love of solitude, the saint was anxious to go there to see whether it would be a suitable place for a friary, so that the worship of the Blessed Virgin might be resumed and that the friars might use it as a place of meditation. So he set out with one companion, but they soon lost their way. But seeing a farmer at work, they asked him if he would show them the way. The farmer, however, answered roughly, "What? Am I to stop plowing and waste valuable time on you?" Then St. Francis, in his quiet way, persuaded the farmer, saying that they would lose nothing by it. So the farmer led them to the place, received their blessing, and returned to the field. What was his surprise when he got back and found the whole field plowed? We heard in the scripture about, I think of both scriptures, right? We can think of back to that Galatians text that let no one trouble me. I bear the marks of Jesus on my body. The world has been crucified to me. I crucified to the world. I think our real world experience of going through things like what North Carolina is going through, what places, all of our places are going through, our cities, what we're going through in our own work, where we're at in organizing, when we're at in movement making, movement supporting, movement nurturing. We're learning from these experiences. The struggle is the school. And Francis is a saint of the struggle as a school, I think. In so many ways, we can identify how he would then take that on himself, even in his own body. And I think, too, of that, "Come to me, all you are weary and find life burdensome, and I will refresh you." The refreshment of knowing that we're plowing the fields with each other and for one another. It may not be the miracle of others doing this for us. We've got to do the work ourselves, but we're not doing it alone. We're doing it together, and we're doing it with these communion of these saints, these brave people who have gone before us and are still with us. And so that's what I'm thinking of this year as we celebrate this wonderful feast of Francis of Assisi. Another part of it that is worth thinking about and worth spending some time about is, I didn't realize until I looked, things like the Canticle of the Sun. Francis composed that canticle, and he did mean it to be a poem. He meant it to be sung too, and the instructions were for them to sing the Canticle of the Sun, or the Canticle of Creation, as a preaching tool, but also I think as a movement, as a spiritual upbuilding tool. Like we use slogans, like we use song, how song is such an important part of teaching, of political education even. And he wrote that while he had to go and stay at a bishop's house where he was Francis had gone through a lot of illness throughout life, and late in his life, he was going blind. He had suffered from terrible eye disease and eye illnesses. And in one time, trying to go to a place where there could be a doctor to help him with this, delayed by bad weather, he's feeling horrible. He can't even he can't even be exposed to daylight. He's in a dark room because his eyes can't take the sunlight. And through all of that comes up with the inspiration to sing a song of praise that begins, "Praise brother son." You know, that one to be able to take and tolerate the light again. I think he's also a patron for all of us as we come off, especially powerful week of action in the nonviolent Medicaid army, of knowing how our healthcare system is broken and breaks people, and that we need to be prophets of a better way that is truly possible in the here and now. And I think that's what Francis's poverty was teaching him, and certainly teaches us, that poverty is not the answer, and that the main thing we have to plow of mental ideas is this attachment that poverty is inevitable, it's unchangeable, and it can't end. And I think actually, in a very, maybe it's an ironic way, Francis is the patron, one of the powerful patrons, to say, no, it doesn't have to be this way. And to trying to compose songs, movements, educational pieces, stories, spaces of storytelling and sharing, motivating us to find that better way.